Hi everyone. This video is going to be about the final paper in LIB 102. Okay, so here we go. First of all, paper needs to be a 5 to 6 page essay on the following topic. Why does a full understanding of our world require the humanities in addition to the sciences? Illustrate your discussion with reference to 2 specific primary texts assigned in this class, and explain what we can learn from those texts that goes beyond science. Choose 2 complementary texts that can be read as part of a conversation. That is, one of the texts can be read as a response to questions raised by the other. You should refer to at least 2 secondary sources, but note that this is not a research paper. You should be able to complete the paper drawing only from the required and recommended resources included in this course. All right, so initially here, what do we know? We know the paper needs to be 5 to 6 pages, 1-inch margins, double space, appropriate formatting. Don't make me reformat your papers. That just upsets me. And don't use 12-point font. Don't use 14-point font. Justify everything left. So you know that the formatting just needs to be basic. You need to choose 2 primary texts. You might be asking yourself, what's a primary text? Well, it depends on who's telling you, but in the realm of this class, the primary texts are the main readings from the class. So don't use the secondary sources on those texts. So what are the primary sources in this class? Well, we read Descartes' Meditations. You read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. You watched Wagner's Tristan and Isolde and perhaps read it as well. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead for week 5. Those are the primary texts. So all the articles written about that or secondary texts related to those things, those are the secondary sources. So you need 2 of the primary sources. So let's say that there's a question that you think that Descartes posed, like what does it mean to be? What does it mean that I exist for Descartes? And then maybe you can answer that with something from Mary Shelley, like what does it mean to be for the monster? Or how does the monster, if Descartes says, I think, therefore I am, then you could bring the monster in, right? Because the monster thinks. So as such, the monster exists. As such, we might be able to consider that the monster is human. And that might be the argument of your paper, or at least that might relate to how the humanities can teach us, or why we need the humanities in order to create a full understanding of our world, as opposed to merely having a scientific perspective. You don't have to use that example. That's probably not the best example. I'm just throwing one out there so that you know what you need to do. Okay, first page here. In your introduction included clear definition of the humanities, including how they differ from the sciences, and a concise summary of how a humanistic understanding can sometimes go beyond a scientific one. We've been talking about this throughout the entire course. Do not define humanity. Humanity is just the totality of humans. That's not what the humanities are. There are plenty of resources in this class that you should have engaged with that will help you to define the humanities. Don't use Webster's definition of the humanities. Who cares what Webster's definition says? This is a philosophy and a critical thinking class. Why does Webster get to decide what things are? And often those are just merely stipulative definitions, and that's not what we're looking here for here. We're looking for a more philosophical and theoretical definition of the humanities. So in one page, define them and explain how a humanistic understanding goes beyond a scientific one. Second page, explain the conversation that you will use to illustrate your claim about the humanities' ability to contribute to your understanding. State which 2 texts you will use and summarize how one of them can be read as a response to a question raised by the other one. Okay, so here's where you state your texts and how they relate to knowledge that goes beyond the humanities. Oh yeah, and we also had Hamlet, right? So make sure that you remember that. There's a great, you could probably put Hamlet in juxtaposition to every single other reading in this class. And so, all right, so you're gonna take these two texts. They're going to be talking about something that goes beyond the realm of science or scientific, where a scientific explanation doesn't really provide the totality. And then you are going to summarize them. Now, don't choose too long texts to fill up a bunch of space. Remember that citations over 40 words need to be indented because we use APA in this class. But so if they're long quotes, then you need to summarize them. Explain them in your own words using just a few sentences and how they're going to relate back again to why we need humanistic understanding of things. Next, and no more than the 3 next pages, give a detailed interpretation of your chosen texts, focusing primarily on those text contribution to your understanding of the specific question you selected. You may need to summarize some aspects of your chosen text before trying to explain their meaning, but your discussion should be primarily analysis rather than mere summary. In other words, explain the contribution of the text to human understanding, not just what the text says or what happens in their plots. So here, do not just say, in Hamlet, Hamlet sees a ghost, and then the ghost tells him to avenge his death. And then Hamlet does this. And then Gertrude does that. And then Ophelia does this. That's a book report. That's not what we're doing here. What we want you to do is some analysis and evaluation. So if you're talking about what it means to be a monster, you don't need to really talk about Frankenstein in general in the plot summary. Rather, you would take the portions of the text that relate to monstrosity or to the monster being human or whatever, just to continue with our example. And then you would demonstrate how those specific actions, comments, beliefs, psychological ideas relate back to the fundamental theme or thesis of your paper. Don't explain what happened in the stories. I already know what happened in the stories. So this needs to relate back to your fundamental question and thesis. So that's 3 pages. And then finally, in conclusion, summarize how the insights of your chosen text show that the humanities can go beyond science, as you stated in your introduction, and reiterate why the insights of the humanities are necessary to have a full understanding of our world. So one thing, in one of the articles we read, science can't really tell us what to do in the realm of morality. And so that would be the realm of ethics. Ethics is usually housed within the realm of philosophy. Philosophy is a humanity. And so, science can't tell us if God exists or doesn't exist. Science can't tell us whether or not we have a soul. There are some really technical things too that perhaps science can't really tell us, like how the mind emerges out of electrical impulses. We know that it does, or it seems to be linked to that in some causal manner. But we don't know how it does that. How literally an electrical impulse can become who I think that I am, Justin, things like that. So anyway, you should reiterate why the insights of the humanities are necessary to have a full understanding of our world and of the human condition. Now, you might not believe that. You might have a scientific viewpoint where you believe everything can be explained by science or ought to be, or that it can be reduced to explanations through that method. But even if you believe that, it's always a healthy exercise to argue for things that you don't actually believe in, and do research into those areas, appropriate research and fair research. We end up learning a lot about these things. So even if you don't believe that it is the case that you need philosophy and literature and knowledge of history and other things in order to have a full grasp of human knowledge, you'll need to argue for it anyway in this paper, and it'll be good for you to evaluate that. Okay, so again, going back, remember 5 to 6 pages, 2 primary texts. They need to be in conversation with each other, one answering the questions posed by the other. 2 secondary texts, so just make sure, and again, you can find those in this class. If you do reference things, make sure you're referencing academic sources like academically published journal articles and books, not just random websites. .com websites are not good information sources for academic research. And so if you utilize those sources, obviously I'll know that you didn't read the recommended resources, perhaps not even read the instructions for the assignment. Because as it says here, all you need are the required and recommended resources from this course. You can find those under the weekly tabs in the resources sections. So you need 5 to 6 pages, 2 primary texts, 2 secondary texts that relate to that, and then the breakdown here. I'm not going to go through it again, but 1-page introduction, 1 page here, no more than 3 pages, and then a 1-page conclusion. So anyway, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I hope that you found this video helpful.